I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey, 5-Star listeners. Before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Hey, John Strohmeyer. Welcome back to 5-Star Counsel. This week, we are lucky enough to be joined by Maddy Martin from Smith AI. Welcome back, Maddy.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you. This week, we're talking about increasing the speed to expert, and it's a bunch of jumbled words. What I'm trying to get at, what I wanted you to talk to us about, is how do we cut down the time it takes for a potential client to go from raising their hand and saying, I need help, to being onboarded? Because the faster we get them onboarded, the faster they start receiving those legal services. And whether you've picked Mike Whalen's expert status or you've picked the kind of more broad-based, less expert status as a lawyer, either way, every practice benefits from speeding up how people can get through your system. And there's a lot that we can be talking about. And with that kind of wide opening for you, Maddy, I'm going to let you just start talking about what you think is important.
No, I mean, John, I appreciate that. And I think the most important thing, if we consider that in this scenario, the expert is the attorney. Now, we could argue, is it the intake specialist? Is it the paralegal? But let's say that it's the attorney. You really have to think, okay, access means time, and there's only so much time for those prospective clients to connect with the attorney because, frankly, the attorney has other fish to fry. I mean, not the new prospective clients aren't important, but they also have to balance it with billable hours, time spent on clients, managing the firm if you're the owner also. And as a result, you really have to think about, what does the access look like? Because speed to the expert is one thing, but it depends on that expert being available. Because if you run into a brick wall, your speed doesn't matter. So you have to have that access point open first, and then you can talk about how fast the car can go. So if we're talking about calendaring, one thing that's really important is to allocate your calendar to new growth, to new potential appointments, consultations, insofar as it aligns with your growth goals. And what I mean is, you need less time available on a day-to-day basis if your pipeline is very full, if you're batting clients away like stray cats, and you're saying, when I open up the funnel, so to speak, when I make myself available, it just fills up and no big deal. Fine. But if you are hungry, you've just hung your shingle, or right now you're just looking to grow, maybe you've opened a new office or you've added on another partner, these are times when you want to make sure that you have ample availability and for the most qualified leads. So you don't just want to take every call that's available to you because that's going to be time wasted. You also want to make sure that you have a process for basically getting over those speed bumps and making sure that the people who get past the initial screening process are still full bore on the right road, and the path to success, both for the lead and for the attorney, is working together. That's a case that you probably want to take.
Right. I mean, there's a lot in there. And one of the things that I think that I want to pull out, you said, whether it's the lawyer or paralegal, the person, we need to figure out what that first, and I'm going to call it a choke point. I don't know if that's the right marketing term or not, but the first checkpoint as somebody comes in, you've got to winnow everybody down to one qualifying test. Do they meet it? And it doesn't ultimately matter if it's a lawyer, if it's a paralegal, whoever it is. You've got to know how to say this is a good fit, yes or no. And selfishly, I'll say, look, we use Smith AI in part to start qualifying our leads, because the checkpoint or the choke point, whatever you're going to call it, we figured out the 7 or 8 questions we need to ask. And if you give, what I'll call bad answers to all of them, my firm isn't going to be a good fit for you. If you take off at least one of those as, you're involved in a trust, you own a business, you've got assets outside of the US, kind of any of the things that we say we can help you, or we're going to be really good at helping you, then it makes sense. But if none of those things are satisfied, we know, don't schedule that first call with me. You're going to schedule with my intake team. And really, that's more of a convenience to the person to say, look, we don't fit. We're probably out of your price range. We're not going to get you what you need, but we're going to make sure that you get a nice handoff when you go somewhere else. Like if you're not the right fit for us, still, investing my employees' time in making sure they go to the right place.
I love that. And very few people actually have it that built into their systems to have that referral process in place. And John, that is super impressive. Huge kudos to you, because almost never have I heard they go to my intake person for a referral recommendation, et cetera, to better understand that you're doing your referral partners well by giving them the qualified leads that are important to them. And then also, they're not just getting some form email. Okay, here's a list of attorneys we recommend. Go figure out which of them is going to be good for you, even though you came to us not knowing what's good for you. That person probably isn't equipped to make a decision on the next stage of things, right? It's the equivalent of doing a Google search for them. So that is extremely impressive and definitely top 0.01%. Now, thinking about the questions and that checkpoint. Imagine that checkpoint takes you on those 2 different roads and you have to go on one of them. That means 2 things. One, you have to have questions. You probably also want answers to common sales objections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, and even a little bit of FAQ. You want to be proactive in saying, especially not wasting your breath, but saying for the ones who appear to be qualified, they start to answer the questions correctly. You also want to close out the conversation with, here are the next steps. I'm going to take you on this path to the right. And that's going to mean you talk to the attorney. When you talk to him, it'll be for this long. And you will maybe have a paid or free consultation. That could be a decision point as well. It will be, look, I just sent it to your inbox. It's a calendar invite. Please come prepared. I also emailed you maybe another form to complete or something. If you, again, have high demand, you can add more sort of substantial checkpoints there. Doesn't have to be handled on that call. The other thing is, okay, we'll go and, let's schedule time or transfer you to the intake coordinator for a referral, knowing full well that they're talking to that person for the referral. You're not saying, oh, you're talking to our intake person and then surprise, this is actually a referral. So make sure that you set out the ground rules, because one of the things that the Clio report shows year after year is clients don't know what to expect. And if you don't supply information to them, they don't know the questions to ask. So you, as the expert, your team working for the expert, has to be equipped to anticipate those questions that they should ask or they should know the answer to if they don't ask.
Exactly. Knowing, we're supposedly the experts. We've done this before. We should be able to guide them through and ultimately make it easy. And one of those questions that we recently added is, are you looking to hire an attorney? I don't know how many other attorneys aren't even asking that basic question. Brilliant. Because, it's just a baseline. If you're not looking to hire an attorney, I've got limits on my time. I can't just take everybody and, as much as I would love to answer questions all day long and give it away for free, ultimately I can't. And so we've set up our when people call and they say, well, no, I'm not looking to hire an attorney. I just want some information. That's great. That is precisely why we have our YouTube channel, so people can get some free answers. And there it is. If you're looking for just a quick answer, maybe we've answered it for you.
Yeah, and I think that that's really helpful. It also helps set expectations because in the practice area that you're in, John, right? You have the potential for a lot of referrals from those people who you just talked to very briefly, even if they're unqualified. You're still getting your name out there. So that good experience we were talking about before with making sure they have a warm handoff to the right referral firm, and also that you have a quality conversation no matter who they are and ask them up front, how ready are you? It might not be that exact phrasing. I've seen other ways of doing it where you might not say, are you looking to hire an attorney? Maybe more binary, but instead a range. So how ready are you to hire an attorney? What does your time frame look like for hiring an attorney? And you may get a no answer to that. Like, I don't have one. I'm just looking around right now. Or you might get an answer that says, like, this is really urgent for me. And you might, depending on your practice area, not need to know, are they looking for an attorney, but how urgently they're looking for an attorney. So in criminal defense and personal injury, maybe even in family law and immigration, there can be a sense of urgency and even to the extent of panic that is so extreme that may determine whether or not you're going to speed up the access to an expert because they're doing court the next morning. Like, for example, right. Justy Nickel, we both know Justy. So right. Justy has a process where it's so automated and streamlined, where it goes to the receptionist and then it goes to the intake form, the agreement, billing, et cetera. She gets to work, that she has sped up not just access to her, but also access after her and through her to get the signed agreement so she can actually be in court the next morning if someone has that degree of urgency. So you need to figure out, what question do you need to ask based on your practice area and what you're going to say yes to, or what that answer to that question is going to mean for where you take that conversation. If someone says, John, I'm actually not looking for an attorney, are you in a position where you need to convince them? Like, it sounds like you need an attorney and you want that case and you're going to do everything to compel them to have a consultation? Or are you going to say, you know what, I have plenty on my plate. I don't need to win this person who's not convinced. It's not worth my breath. I'll give them some information and they'll come back to me when they're ready to make a decision.
Exactly. I mean, we've got the choice of the people we bring on. And right now, if they're not in the mood to hire an attorney, it's going to take more energy for me to get them on board. I'm better served. Everybody's better served getting the people who are ready to move forward. Look, it doesn't mean that we don't still take their information, get them on an email list, get them, still educate them, because maybe they even, maybe we'll answer their question indirectly in one of our newsletters. And either they have a good impression of us or they realize how much trouble or how much of a mess they may be creating for themselves. Just one way or another, it doesn't mean just shoo them away, but, how can you protect your calendar?
Well, I mean, and one of the things is that if you are using an online calendaring system, honestly, and you're manipulating it more than it needs to be, that's one of the most common flaws that we see. So again, like that image of speeding towards a brick wall, maybe you're just speeding towards a very narrow path. And if you manage to not knock off the window, the mirrors, you can get through and you'll get to the other side. Well, that's also not ideal. That creates a lot of anxiety. You're not so sure. Are there cars that are hitting the brick wall and they're not getting through? If you're using a solution like Calendly, Acuity, Schedule Once, any of these tools that are available and insanely free or cheap, then you're also going into Google Calendar and you're saying, I'm going to block off, I kid you not, my free time. Well, did you set that time as free on your calendar? Because if you set it as busy, you're never going to be booked by these tools. I mean, people need to look at their calendars and say, do I have this set up properly? Or do I have chunks of time that I'm blocking off for something that literally can't be booked on top of it? Like, you're not going to get the appointments then. Do you have due dates? This is something that we see when people integrate their practice management with their calendar. There are due dates and appointments that are actually not fixed, but reminders that block off your time on your calendar. That's also a problem, because if it's an all-day event, if it's just a reminder to get this done by the end of the day, but it's there at 1 to 2 p.m., you're not going to get a consultation then, and you're sort of erroneously blocking off time that is available. So if that's you, go look at that now and say, like, does my availability truly reflect when I could take a call? Because that could be blocking growth.
That's interesting, because when I think about this, I was thinking, well, I have taken the time when I can have new client calls, and they're segmented out on Calendly of initial calls. Those are usually 7:45 until about 9:30 in the morning, and then from 4:30 until about 6:30 at night. That's when most of the calls were coming in. I would get occasional calls in the middle of the day, but it helped me by just, bracketing those at the beginning and the end of the day. It made sure that I was talking to clients either before they went to work, as they were coming home. It made sense for most of my clients, and it helped me kind of focus on current clients in the middle of the day. And new clients, they got sifted in at the edges of the day, and there was more than enough. And, at the same time, I'm not going to be a slave to just what's there. If we look at something and, call notes come in and say they were a little upset that it was going to take 5 or 6 days to get in front of me because my calendar's wrong, or my calendar's booked, that's the way it is.
Right. Well, so one thing that I will clarify is that what you're doing is absolutely the recommendation, which is you're using the calendaring tool to say, you may book me in these 2 blocks, otherwise I'm busy. Right. And you're taking into account time zone, if you practice in multiple time zones, which some people do. If you have your receptionist booking appointments, that's something that's important to make sure you have down pat, because a receptionist could be across the country, right? And you want to make sure when they're using your booking link that they're using the time of the person who is going to be scheduled. Now, when it comes to having a round robin, for example, you might have 2 partners in a firm, and you can use these calendaring tools to say, I want to speed up the access to the experts. I've got 2 people who I can put in who can be scheduled. They're fairly interchangeable. You do the same practice areas, you're at the same level in the firm, et cetera. Great. You can actually let the calendaring tool choose or even slightly prefer one over the other. Let's say you have an associate, you want them to be attempted first. And if they're not, then you're available. And you can even do it within those time frames. And for example, if you know that you're going to be in court in the morning, back, non-COVID times, you're still going to court every morning, then for a criminal defense attorney, they're going to say, don't ever book me for a consultation in the morning. I'm almost never there, right? So think about how you want your day to work. Are you also at home tutoring your kids because they're not in school right now? Don't just think about work or what the court schedule is going to be or when your Zoom trial is, but also what your lifestyle is and when you prefer to have calls, and also when your brain is geared towards that. Like, if you're the kind of person who, like, thinking about, John, your schedule, you may be, clear and ready and refreshed from the work that you did that day or the day before to have morning and late afternoon calls. Someone else may say, my brain is really sharpest and I have the most energy for sometimes these tiring new client calls where I'm processing really quickly and trying to figure this out. It's unfamiliar territory in the morning. In the afternoon, that's my deep work time. Do what suits your work, your life, your brain, right? And that's something that we don't address very often. Like, how are you wired, and are you setting your calendar up for deep work, for meetings, for clients, new potential clients, time doing a podcast at the time that you are best suited to do that work?
Right. There's a concept. I will be talking shortly with Sherry Walling, who is a professional psychologist. And one of the concepts she has in mind is like the thought of, you've got chaos on one side and rigidity on the other. And you get to choose. You want to be somewhere in the middle. You need some structure, but you can't, unfortunately, lawyers have kind of been trained, we're free thinkers. We can't do well with structured environments. And the problem is everything becomes total chaos. There's never any structure. You don't know what to look for. It doesn't mean everything can fit always into one particular checklist, but you've got to at least get a handle on things so you can see, getting to process and getting some consistency down so that things happen the same way and they're smooth for everybody so you know what to look for.
Well, one last thing about calendaring. I know you know Melissa Shanahan at Velocity Work, and she
Yes.
is going to be presenting on a webinar coming up soon in February about like the Monday map to the Friday wrap. And we're talking about calendaring. And she's saying, start with those big boulders first, block those out. Then the things that you have to commit to that are not life and showing up to dinner with your family every night at 6. Things that are work that are immovable. And then you'll start to see where the pockets of time are that are within your control to adjust. And it doesn't have to be a fixed thing. You can move it around and see if you can make improvements based on tweaks. But the other thing that I'll say is when it comes to, this topic of increasing your speed to the expert, you want to make sure that everyone also knows the rules of the game. So one of the biggest mistakes that we see when you have someone who is in-house doing intake, for example, is that they have their own method. The attorney has their own method. I know it when I see it. It's like that, I don't need to write down the definition. I've been doing this for so long, don't challenge me. That's actually really a problem, even for the best experts, the most seasoned attorneys and legal teams who are behind you. You have to write it down because you, will have more consistent results. You'll be able to look backwards at the data and say, did we always do what we said we were going to do, or are we just at the seat of our pants every time? And also, if you ever sell or merge your firm, you have a set of repeatable processes that give that buyer or investor, or even those discussions, more weight and value because you have actually a playbook for your growth instead of just a believe me, sort of I'm telling you this is how it works sort of conversation.
Right. And kind of pulling this together, knowing who your qualified leads are, setting up your calendar to make sure that everything lines up in the right way and you're not unintentionally closing people off. But it all comes down to this broad process that's not just, I know it when I see it. And the part that attorneys are going to hate to hear is there will be mistakes. You're going to have to train other people to do this. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck doing it all by yourself. And that does mean kind of making some broad decisions, but keeping some human slack in the system to where you may not give somebody final authority. The intake people I'm using in-house, we just started taking taking calls that were questionable for me. We weren't sure if they were really qualified. We'd let them schedule on my calendar, but I'd have my guys call them days ahead of time. As soon as the call came in and they were scheduled, we'd call them internally and I'd have them run that call as though they didn't know really anything else. And just, hey, we know you're talking to John in a few days. We wanted to get some basic information from you. And that way they knew, kind of in a controlled environment, I could coach them before they picked up the phone. Some cases I was actually sitting there with them on the phone, but not acknowledging I was there, just to listen to what they were saying and make sure, okay, well, here's what you may have heard but didn't pick up on, or here are the kind of watchwords, or when you hear this, if they say Medicaid planning, we're just not going to do that. We don't know how to do it. We're not going to learn. We know somebody who's way better at it. The moment you hear that, thank them. We have perfect referrals for you, and off they go. And it's just taking the time, acknowledging that to fill in the gaps on how to get it done. It's going to take some headaches, but you have to get that process down.
I love how active you are in that process and in mentoring and nurturing and educating your team. John, I think that's really something for others to emulate. And I will say, if you're not going after things with that much gusto, you're not going to be making mistakes. And that should be a signal to you. If things are really quiet and like no one's making any mistakes, like how can you push it a little bit more? Where are the opportunities that you haven't addressed yet? Because it is an ongoing conversation. It's not something that's fixed. And are you also allowing your team, who's now having some of these conversations for you or with you, to give you feedback back? How are they contributing to this process? Because A, that adds buy-in. B, it gives you more perspectives that even you, the attorney, may not have considered. Or as you step back and you give your team more control, you need to still remain in touch with the questions that they may have or that they're hearing on the other side of the line. So make sure that your team feels comfortable bringing questions to you. And I think having you initially shadowing them sets up a very collaborative atmosphere from the start where they feel like you have their back and you want them to be successful. So that's a big thing. How do you stay accessible? How do you get the speed to the expert? You also can't be doing every single one of those calls yourself. You have to trust other people. So delegating it and doing it well, as you're describing, is an essential part of this process.
Maddy, I think that is a great summary, and I think that's probably a great place for us to leave it for today. Well, you're with Smith AI, but where should people find you online?
Well, so you can find us at smith.ai. That's just smith.ai. And we would love to have a consultation with you and learn how we can help your law firm grow and sustainable, predictable profits over time that give you peace of mind and the time to join John on shows like this and learn a little bit extra. So use the code 5-STAR for $100 off your first month. And we have some special promos that happen from month to month also that you might stack onto that. So check things out on our website, schedule the consultation, and you can always chat with us live because we don't just answer calls. We also answer website chat, text, and Facebook messages too. So we'll be on the front lines for every channel where you operate.
Excellent. Maddy, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.